Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all doing well on this bright, sunny day. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ron, and I am a peer program coordinator for Spinal Ontario. I would like to introduce you to my co-host, Lubna. She is the manager of the peer program. Say hello, Lubna.
Hello.
Thanks, Lubna. Thank you for joining us today. There are a few rules of engagement I would like to quickly go through before we begin. Participants will be muted upon entry, as this will cut down on the noise, the background noise during our presentation. We will maintain the mute feature throughout the session. If you do not wish to be seen, please ensure your video is turned off. You will still be able to see and hear the meeting if your video and audio are not on. You can change your name that appears on your screen, should you not wish your full name to show. Simply put your cursor over your name, right-click, scroll down, and click on Rename. You can put just your first, your initials, or anything you want. And Christy, it's up to you how you choose to do this. We could either have a Q&A session after the presentation or during. We'll leave that up to the speaker. If you want, you can use the raised hand option, which is located by clicking on the reaction button at the bottom of the screen. When prompted, unmute yourself to ask your question, or type your question in the chat feature located at the bottom of the screen. Now that we have that out of the way, I would like to turn it over to our guest presentator, Christy from Spinal Cord Injury Ontario. Christy, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christy Hamilton. I share an office with Ron Ratty at the Hamilton Regional Rehab Center. And I'm happy to share some of my experiences, both being an attendant in my past, but also 20 years of being a supportive housing manager in a variety of capacities. So the things that I'm going to share today are some of the experiences that I've come across, both as an attendant and as a manager in a supportive housing setting. It may not be true for all of you, but I'm just going to share some insights from my past experiences. So today I really wanted to just touch on steps we can take to create healthy relationships with our professional caregivers. And again, these are some of the insights and experiences that I've come across of being in the field. So I want to highlight that the relationship between a caregiver and a client is undoubtedly one that has a significant impact on both people's health and happiness. We're going to look at three different aspects of the presentation today. The first one being both the client and the professional caregiver have roles to play in the relationship. We're going to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of that relationship. And really, what are some strategies and steps that we can take away to maintain healthy relationships with our professional caregivers? So when we look at the roles of the healthcare provider as well as the client, we know that both client and professional caregivers have demanding roles. And when we have a clear understanding of what role that each play and the expectations, we often see a significant reduction in conflict, because if we know what expectations are involved, then it minimizes some of the conflict that arises, because each person knows what role they play and what they're responsible for in the relationship. So when we think about the client role, the most important aspect is the client's ability to direct their own care. Clients are important members of the healthcare team. If anything, are the team lead. It's important that clients take on that responsibility, no matter how long you've had a caregiver in your life, that you are continuously directing that care and having the autonomy to direct the care in which you would like to have it done, or tasks be done the way you would want them. It's important as a client that we ensure equipment's being maintained, that you have the necessary equipment for the care tasks that are required, as well as the supplies on hand that are required for your care. It's important to remember that your home is also my workplace. So knowing that with the professional healthcare workers that come in, that yes, it's your home and needs to be respected as your home. However, when you sign on with a provider, you're acknowledging that there are some health and safety implications that need to be maintained. And it's really important that you're ensuring that floors and space of where the care is being done is free from obstruction, that pets are put away during time of care so that they're not to get underfoot and cause a tripping hazard. And just ensuring that, it goes without saying with our smoking bylaws and smoking and organizational policies surrounding smoking, if you're a smoker, that you air your home out for the appropriate length of time as set out by your provider's policies and procedures. The role of the professional caregiver. It's important that as caregivers, we provide compassionate care. We can't say we understand because we don't, but it's important that we provide that compassionate care, that we create an element of trust. Any relationship requires trust, so it's important that we're taking the time to build that, and we do that through mutual respect, acknowledging that we are the hands and the feet, that sometimes we're asked to do things that the client can't do for themselves, or sometimes as a caregiver, we do tasks that perhaps the client can do. However, we're conserving energy so that they're able to engage and participate in things that later on in their day that they otherwise may not have been able to or have the energy to participate in as a result. It's important that as a caregiver, we are our client's advocate when we see things that don't jive with us or kind of not sitting right, that we are standing up and we're advocating to the providers or to the powers that be to advocate for change. And it's really, really important to be friendly, but not friends. And I know that can sometimes come across as being cold, or but it's important to acknowledge that there's important boundaries at play here, and that is to protect that professional caregiver and client relationship. So what are some good things about this relationship? Is transparency. So when between the client and the caregiver, when there's this sense of where you can share without being fearful of stepping on anyone's toes, acknowledging when things may not go as planned, and acknowledging that mistakes happen and that correction may be needed, but having that transparency and comfort to come forward and say, look, I accidentally broke your favorite mug while doing dishes, opposed to patching it up together and putting it in the back of the cupboard, as I've seen in my past. It's important that we're compassionate, that we're encouragers, active listening, and that's, ensuring that we're intentional with the time that we spend with our clients, and that, we're putting our phones aside and we're, the hour or the 15 minutes or whatever time that the caregiver has with the client, that is their designated time and does deserve our undivided attention. It's important, again, to create mutual respect. And really from the get-go, I can't encourage it enough to establish boundaries. I know some clients have different areas of their house where they, it's set from the beginning where they do not want attendants to be roaming about through their house. Or there's established roles with other family members within the house. So it's important that boundaries are established and communicated respectfully, but ensuring that that is maintained. And I love this quote by Maya Angelou. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I know for myself, in different experiences I've been in, it's those people who did take the time and were intentional, who were compassionate, and who you have trusting relationships, that it does make an impact and a difference. So when we look at some of the negative aspects of this relationship, kind of categorized it in two different ways here. So when we look at the bad on both parties, both the client and the healthcare professional, Some of the things that contribute to conflict within the relationship is inflexibility. Nope, your time is 1 o'clock. I'm sorry, or you have to be in bed by this time. I know with the current staff shortages and difficulty in securing time and being able to move forward with that. But it's important that we demonstrate a level of flexibility because life happens, and sometimes clients are invited to go out for dinner with a friend and perhaps may need a later bed booking, or perhaps something comes up that things need to change slightly. So I think it's important that on both sides that there's a level of flexibility. Same goes true for the healthcare professional. They may be running late. They got a call from their child's school of a matter they had to deal with. So again, it's just kind of highlighting the importance of being flexible. Preconceived notions. As being a previous supportive housing manager, I have heard it in the staff room. Oh, identifying certain people with new staff saying, oh, for example, Mr. Jones, you have him today, without really letting the new staff formulate her own opinions of Mr. Jones. So again, it's important that, within that relationship, that we don't come into it with preconceived notions. And same is true for clients. They may hear that they're getting a particular staff person that day, may not be their favorite person because of things that they've heard along the way or through that rumor mill. Of course, it goes without saying, when there's disrespect on both sides, creates conflict within the relationship. Again, boundary crossing. And I can't stress this enough. And over the years as a manager, I always when I looked at social media and I explained to my teams how important it was not to become Facebook friends with your clients. Reason being, or why I had shared that with my teams over the years, is that you're giving your clients insight into your personal life that otherwise they would never have. And then kind of creating this false sense of friendship that perhaps you didn't intend it to be on both sides. So I think it's important that you establish healthy boundaries, recognize and acknowledge that it is a professional relationship, it's not a friendship. When we look at poor knowledge and enforcement of service providers' policy and procedures, sometimes new staff may not always be up to speed with policy or organizational procedures, values, and missions. So again, that can often create conflict because some staff will come in and say, unfortunately, we're not able to assist with those tasks as it goes against our policy and procedures, when others may be coming in and doing it unknowingly that it's a breach of the policy. Or they may know that it is a breach of the policy, but may not agree with their organizational take on things and do it anyways, which again can lead to a very slippery slope. When concerns, complaints are not addressed, or when clients see or staff see that there's no action or change, can also create this brewing, bubbly conflict within this relationship. Some of the ugly aspects of the relationships that I've seen over the years is discrimination, whether that's based on someone's nationality, religion, that person is from a racial minority and I don't want them in my home. Unfortunately, I've seen that happen, and it is an ugly aspect of that relationship. That care needs exceed service provision, that the client requires more care than what they're currently getting, which also has created lots of conflict because the staff are in a tight spot. They wish they could do more. They're only given a certain amount of hours, but yet the client is declining as a result of not enough service hours. And that can also create conflict within the relationship. When there's been failed attempts at conflict resolution, when there's been health and safety infractions, when the service provider has come out to say, your lift hasn't been maintained, you don't have gloves or soap available to staff to wash their hands. When any of those things have been identified to the client as needing to be taken care of or as a health and safety infraction, it does create conflict within that relationship and your relationship with your service provider. So it's important that when health and safety concerns are brought forward, that you work with your service provider to ensure that it's mitigated quickly. So not only for your health and safety as the client, but also the health and safety of the staff coming in. We've seen when there's been failed systems navigation, when there's been inappropriate placement of clients in certain programs, or when there's been staff that come in that aren't properly trained or know how to do appropriate lifts and transfers. There's been instances too when there's been failed system navigation, when the whole relationship between the client and the provider breaks down as a result of that. And then of course, when there's been criminal activity, over my years, I've been witness to, fraud, unfortunately, clients being taken advantage of by their healthcare providers because they had this trusting relationship, or drugs or weapons. So again, criminal activity can also be kind of a nasty part of this side, because you are having people into your home that you are trusting, that are vetted and safe people to be in your home. But again, sometimes these things sort of happen as well. So I'm going to stop sharing, and Lubna is going to share a video clip that I kind of, when I looked at this clip, it was a great illustration of the impact of the relationship between the caregiver and their clients. And it's from caregivers across the sector. It's not only PSWs or nursing, but other caregivers or professional health people who have identified how the relationship impacts them. So I'm going to stop there.
I had a situation as a supervisor where there was a death of a minor child. I was informed that the child had died from what appeared to be a violent injury. For any child welfare worker, the worst outcome is a fatality. It's what those of us who are honest always fear. Part of you imagines it, what am I going to do if I get this call? So there's kind of a scenario in your head, and then the call comes and it's like, this can't be real, but it is.
The thing that will probably haunt me forever was a time when a whole family came in after a fire. A TV had exploded. The child was 6 or 7, was pretty severely burned. I don't think I got out of there until like 3 in the morning, and I was dead tired, and I remember going home and could not sleep. I couldn't get the smell out of my mind. I remember thinking, like, I don't want to go back there tomorrow. And I got up and I wrote a letter to God. And I asked God to watch over the mother.
There are a number of terms that are being used to describe the impact on the professional caregiver of working with people who have or are experiencing traumatic events. So secondary traumatic stress, indirect trauma, compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma. It's contact experience that you have. That's what vicarious means, that you're not being traumatized primarily yourself, and yet working with people who have been has an effect on you. I was always taught that you couldn't feel other people's emotions, and that turns out not to be true. In the brain, the mirror neuron system has been discovered, and we do feel each other's emotions all the time because our parts of our brain that experience emotions reflect the emotions in another person. And it's a wide range of emotions that come along with trauma. So fear, anger, rage, shame, despair, grief, all those feelings are all part of trauma and exposure to toxic stress.
The constant flow of humanity having to make life and death decisions every day, and you can't be wrong. This pressure to perform at peak capacity, this pressure of fear of being sued for malfeasance is a constant pressure. Those who are extraordinarily effective in caregiving and bedside manners, if you want, those folks are especially vulnerable. If you can't deal with secondary trauma, you're not going to last very long in this field. And everybody knows this. How you manage that is a big deal, too. If you are not really doing your job effectively in that because of the emotionalities, if you can't shift to the right side of your brain, then that's a real problem. So many of them leave, in effect. But they, too, have difficulty in recognizing when they have gone across the line, saying to themselves, I need to take a break, that I'm overwhelmed or I'm filled up or whatever you want to put it.
Burnout isn't a term I especially like because to me that's sort of a shooting star phenomenon, that somebody gets out of school or starts a new job and their plan is to change the world and they think they're going to do it in a matter of days. Sometimes people will burn out. They'll keep trying to change things, trying to do things and meeting with obstacles. And in the process will lose their boundaries, will lose their objectivity, may become jaded, angry, cynical. So not only are they not helpers anymore, they start to become a roadblock to getting service. And so fortunately we don't see a lot of that. What I see more commonly is rust outs, and I don't hear that term a lot, but it's just like if you had an old car and didn't wax it once in a while and take care of it, you're going to be thin in the metal. And I think caregivers have to be very careful that they're doing self-care, they're getting support that will help you for the long haul so that you don't hurt yourself.
So professional caregivers can have this image of themselves, this belief that because they've been professionally trained, that they can be very objective, they can maintain that objectivity that somehow insulates them from whatever's being said or done around them. And that's just not possible. If you're around someone who is emoting pain, I don't care who you are, you're going to feel it. And if you don't know that, then you may be confused by your reactions because you think you shouldn't be having the same kind of symptoms that someone who has unresolved trauma often has. So now you're confusing yourself.
By the very fact that we are giving care, that means we're going to come face to face with trauma. And I think that the very first piece of that is to talk about it and to invite our clients to talk about it, but to talk about it ourselves with professional colleagues as well as family members who are able to give an ear.
I think in healthy organizations, there's attention paid to time allotted where these stories can be shared and the person on the receiving end knows how to process that in a meaningful way. Storytelling needs to be a part of the world of people who care for people.
So it's something about that. Maybe I'm sitting here thinking about.
I start out presentations by asking practitioners to raise their hand if they feel honored to be working with traumatized people. That it's a privilege to watch traumatized people go from a ball of fear to happy and confident. That is the essence of compassion satisfaction. A client smiling. A client says, I think I don't need you anymore. The client is clearly articulating what you thought of initially, and they're using it in their own words. That counterbalances the impact of compassion fatigue. Indeed, I would recognize, and my models have proven this to be the case, if you have high compassion satisfaction, it counterbalances compassion fatigue because it undermines the very kind of notions that that compassion fatigue is associated with, that I'm overwhelmed, that I'm incompetent, that I'm not effective because of my emotional reactions. Empathy is an occupational hazard because you can't do good work as a practitioner without it. The challenge, though, with being empathic is that you open yourself up, and those that you're empathizing with can leave fingerprints on your heart. In that, as you open up and you put all of your issues aside, and you focus like a laser beam on what's going on with them, and you imagine yourself walking in their shoes, they get it. They sense that you're with them every step of the way. But then when you have to close it back up, when the session is over, when you now get in your car and you're going home, that's when those fingerprints start showing up.
Thanks, Lubna.
You're welcome.
Now I'm having difficulty advancing my slides. Oh, there we go. I'll have to do it this way. So I hope you found that short documentary valuable and of interest. I thought it was really interesting to hear from a caregiver's perspective in a variety of different sectors of the impact of that relationship between the client and the caregiver. And so in following up with that, and just how do we maintain those positive relations with the people that we're working with? So again, cultivating that mutual respect, addressing concerns privately, timely, and professionally. If something is nattering at you as a client, it's so important to pull your attendant aside and say, you know, when you do this, this is how it makes me feel, and could we switch it up and do it this way? I find that the best relationships have this open communication, and that things are addressed timely, and they don't get swept under the rug or fester. And I find when things start to fester, and that's when we see conflicts arise and things bubble over, and it becomes a bigger issue than what it could have been very quickly mitigated if had it been dealt with in a timely manner. However, I get it that there are situations where, you know, you may be intimidated to bring it forward to that particular attendant. Therefore, it is important that you speak with your providers, coordinators, or supervisors or managers to let them know that there are concerns and that you'd like to be part of the solution and resolve it timely. It's important that you maintain boundaries. Again, being reminded to be friendly, but not friends. Again, it goes for anybody. It's not what we say that matters, but how we say it, our tone and intonation. I always laughed over the years when staff would come in to greet a client. There were always 3 different types of staff. You know, the staff that kind of saunters in and says, "Oh, I'm here." And then there's the staff that kind of rushes in, you know, "Oh, you know, we only have 15 minutes. We're short-staffed. Susie's on lunch." And then you have the other staff that comes in and greets you. "Good morning, how are you? You know, what did you think of that Leafs game last night?" Who takes the time to acknowledge, and there's that mutual respect. But again, when you look at those 3 examples, it was interesting how you knew exactly how the booking was going to go down before anything even begins, just by how you were greeted at the door. So again, I always reminded my teams that it's not necessarily what we say that matters, but how we say it. Because we also know that body language dominates the message. Understanding that life happens. It's important that we all demonstrate flexibility, give each other grace. Things are going to happen, such is life. Another kind of cliche, but I like it, is you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. You know, it's important that, you know, when things erupt or come up, that we again are demonstrating grace. We're acknowledging that mistakes have happened. You're not happy, you're disappointed, you're frustrated, or you're overwhelmed. But again, acknowledging it and moving forward from it. And remembering there's no I in team. The client, the healthcare provider, the community nursing, social workers, counselors, we're all part of this one big team to ensure that we're providing wraparound services that are needed. And again, I always share this with this presentation to remind, because sometimes I think people forget at the end of the day that their caregiver has a family at home too, and that you are not the only client that that person may see in a day. So if that caregiver is coming in and they're not as cheery as they usually are, or there's been some missteps along the way, acknowledging that we are all human and that behind every professional caregiver, there is a family. And at this time, if there's any questions or comments, I'm happy to share what my experience has been, but importantly to hear from you. What were some best practices or strategies that worked for you in creating and maintaining a positive relationship with your caregiver?
I will also stop my recording right now so people can ask their questions without thinking that it compromises their confidentiality in any way.